Story 1. My mother, aged 89, had a friend who could not have children, so she adopted a baby girl. A few months later, she found out she was pregnant, so she returned the little girl to the orphanage. Story 2. I worked as an intensive care unit nurse for 5 years. I saw a husband yell at his wife, who was experiencing a significant myasthenia gravis flare and could not cough strongly enough to clear secretions. She needed regular suctioning and support to prevent intubation. At one point, he stood outside the room and started screaming, "I can't believe you're doing this," and other incoherent words. I remember staring and thinking it could not be what I was hearing. I do not know how I managed not to physically confront the man. Story 3. A couple of years ago, I was staying 4 hours from home in a city I was unfamiliar with, in a hostel next to the hospital while my late husband was undergoing cancer treatment. He was 33 at the time and I was 26. While spending weeks on end there, you become familiar with and talk to other family members in similar situations. Mostly it was older couples because 33 is relatively young for long stays for cancer treatment, at least in my area. I think it was week 4 or 5 of our stay. My late husband was napping after treatment, so I went to the common room where we would do puzzles or play board games to pass the time. One morning, I was chatting with an older man, probably in his 70s, who was wheelchair-bound and improving. He was getting discharged the next day and was absolutely beaming with excitement after a 12-week stay. He had a wife who lived in the city, so she visited him every day. She would will him down to the common room just to get out of his hospital room and change the scenery. We often played games together, built puzzles, and sometimes just had long chats over tea. His wife seemed perfectly happy, as one could be in that situation, and there were no alarming signs that anything was wrong. She treated him with so much love and compassion and was counting down the days until his discharge. One day, the day before he was ready to go home, his wife wheeled him into the common room as usual. But instead of sitting next to him on the couch to finish a puzzle we had all been working on the day before, she walked around his chair and stood in front of him with her arms crossed. It turned out the doctor had given the wife a long list of prescription medications he needed to pick up once he left the hospital the next day. Whatever happened, his wife snapped. She yelled and made a scene in the room, shouting that she couldn't do this anymore and that he was too much trouble. She said she was leaving him and filing for divorce. The older gentleman was in shock, fighting back tears, and saying nothing. She then threw the piece of paper, presumably the prescription and discharge instructions, into his lap. She told him, "My lawyer will deal with all the details once you get home, but I won't be there. I hope you find someone to get your prescription." Then she stomped out of the room. This elderly man, who was so excited to finally be leaving, quietly sat there and sobbed. She never came back. You could hear her shoes clicking down the hallway until the loud closing of the door. Everyone just watched in disbelief, unsure of what to do. My heart broke. I did everything I could not to cry. I couldn't just leave him there. So I got up, wheeled him back to his room, and told him it was going to be okay. I told him she was probably just frustrated and that he would sort it all out soon. When I left, I took his prescription and went to the pharmacy myself to pick it up. I think it was around $50. I came back an hour later. He thanked me and cried. He offered to give me money for the medications and the trouble. I said absolutely not. I sat with him for a while and we just sat. He talked when he wanted to. We did a crossword together. Then it was time for his medication. When I stood up to leave, I gave him a hug as he cried. I then spoke to the nurse and told her what happened. She said she would contact his son. My heart shattered that day. The next day, he was gone. I knew he was leaving in the morning, so when I went back to the common room, I knew he wouldn't be there, but I checked anyway. Then I checked his hospital room. He was gone. I have always wondered about him and if he was okay. This was back in 2018, and he still comes to my mind. Story 4. I saw someone get hit by a motorcycle near our school. The person was bleeding on the ground, and instead of people immediately rushing to help, a group of bystanders pulled out their phones to record it. They were not even calling for help, just standing there, filming for social media. I know some people might have already reported it, but most of them just gathered around and recorded him. Story 5. I was new in healthcare and had a patient who was suffering from brain cancer. She was in the end stage and blind, had open sores all over, with a constant fever over 103 degrees. The poor woman was suffering, but the antibiotics were only delaying the inevitable. Her daughter refused to sign palliative care paperwork to stop treatment and let her mother die in comfort because she, and this is verbatim, wanted her to live until after the 8th of the month for her Social Security and pension money. I wanted so badly to tell her that all of those payments are a month behind anyway, so if the patient passed any time after the first day of the month, the family was still entitled to that month's payment because it was for the previous month. I was newly employed and afraid to speak up, so I went to my supervisor, who sent a social worker in to speak to the family. They didn't listen or didn't believe her and refused to stop treatment until after they got the money. Then they put her on hospice, and the patient passed within hours around the 10th of the month. I lost much faith in humanity after that interaction. Story 6. Teenagers winning real goldfish from a game at the fair, then stomping on about 4 bags of goldfish to kill them. This happened in front of my children, who are 4 and 5 years old. Story 7. My father-in-law accidentally caused a traumatic brain injury to our 10-year-old child, leaving her in a coma. Then they hired lawyers and decided to follow their advice, cutting off all contact with us. They ghosted their 3 grandchildren after permanently disabling the eldest one, and bankrupted their son and me. We are no longer part of the family, which acts as though 5 people missing from it were never there. Story 8. My mother was a major cigarette smoker. She would go through a few packs a day, smoking inside the house. My brother has severe asthma, which developed when he was about 8 years old. He turned blue and nearly died. The doctor said she needed to stop smoking around him. Instead, she got dehumidifiers for every room in the house. Story 9. When I was a kid, my mom decided we were going to raise chickens from eggs. It was so much fun for my brothers and me watching them incubate and seeing the chickens hatch. Right after they all hatched, they started getting sick. I don't remember exactly what with because I was so young. My mom took the box they were in, brought it to the garbage, and dumped all the baby chickens inside alive. She tied up the bag and took it outside to the trash. It still makes me feel like I'm going to throw up when I think about it almost 20 years later. Story 10. In the 1970s and 1980s, my grandmother had a female friend who seemed to only like her daughters but not her only son, who was a late addition to the family. We later found out her husband sexually abused young girls and really disliked his son for not being a girl. In the 1980s, the son died in a car crash when he was 18. He was with his friends. When someone crashed into their car, he was in the back and died immediately. His mother told my grandmother, "It doesn't matter. I was fed up with him anyway. I am from Germany," and what she actually said was, "Egal, der war mir über." My grandmother died a couple of months ago at the age of 95, but she still cried when she told that story. Story 11. I saw a man get stabbed on the train, and many people recorded it, then moved to the next train car to continue their ride. I do not know what is more traumatizing: watching a man get stabbed at 8 a.m. on my way to work, or realizing that no one in a packed train car would help me in a similar situation if I needed it. I would probably just end up on social media as I died in the hospital. I ran to the train conductor and called emergency services. Story 12. An employee at a company I worked for had a baby born prematurely with a heart condition, and the baby was in intensive care as a result. After the birth, their relationship broke down, and they ended up having to sell and leave the house that had been bought as the forever home for their new family. For reasons that are obvious to anyone with half a brain or a quarter of a heart, an impending divorce, house move, and a newborn in the neonatal intensive care unit necessitated them taking a leave of absence from the office paid out as sick leave, not holiday pay. They made a post on their Facebook with a few photos of the house in the process of being packed up, basically just sharing an update and blowing off a bit of steam about the hand they had been dealt. One of their coworkers saw it and came running to our manager, complaining, in an open plan office where multiple people could hear them, that this person was supposed to be off ill but instead was posting on Facebook and how unprofessional that was. I have rarely conceived such an instantaneous dislike for another human being. Story 13. I was working as a veterinary technician in college when someone dropped off their senior dog for euthanasia. They said they would be too sad to stay and the veterinarian was too busy to handle it. So I stayed and held him myself as he went to sleep for the final time. He was the best boy. Story 14. This is my mom's story, but I was there in the direct aftermath. My mom was walking outside our apartment complex when she tripped and fell. She did not know she had a bone disease, and when she fell, she completely shattered her entire hand, hit her head, and badly bruised her knees. She lay on the ground in shock, crying for help, but people just walked past her. She didn't have her phone, so she had to drag herself into our building and back to the apartment, all while dry heaving and sobbing in agony. When I came to the door and found her, she looked absolutely awful. She kept repeating in shock how nobody came to help her, and I felt terrible for her. I helped her and then called my grandmother to drive her to the hospital because she was too injured and her head was visibly bleeding. It absolutely boils me inside knowing that people walked past her. Nobody came to help, even though she was clearly injured and not under the influence of anything. Story 15. I worked at a nursing home, and someone wheeled their mother or grandmother in when we were busy passing dinner trays. The patient had dementia, was in a wheelchair, and spoke only a few words. No one knew who this woman was. The internet did not really exist back then, so there was no way of posting her picture. This woman died as an unidentified person. It was heartless and cruel. Story 16. A girl and her husband living on Camp Pendleton were moving to a different duty station. They had a 14-year-old cat. The cat needed to be rehomed and had only hours before being dropped off at the shelter. I showed up to pick her up, and the cat was skin and bones, looking nothing like the photos in the post. The girlfriend was more concerned about her hair and nails than the cat or her own child. Their garage was filled with dirt bikes, motorcycles, and four-wheelers, and she was soaking wet. I am confident in saying this was not a case of could not afford to get her help, but rather could not be bothered to get her help. The woman even said, "Bye, you stupid cat," as I loaded her into my car. I was much younger then, and it took everything in me not to confront her. The initial plan was to find the cat a home to spend her golden years in. Within days, actually not even 36 hours, we were at the veterinarian. The cat had many health issues. I spent close to $20,000 over the next 6 months, but we ultimately lost her to kidney failure. I had her cremated, and 10 years later, she still has a place in my home. Rest in peace, Duchess. I tried so hard, and I know you did too, baby girl. If you happen to be the previous owner or have treated an animal similarly, from the bottom of my heart, I condemn your actions. Story 17. This was about 10 years ago. I was a student doing a clinical rotation, and we had a patient in the end stages of lung cancer who could not lie flat due to the buildup of lung fluid. Since we could not lay her down without her struggling to breathe, we called in nursing and her radiation oncologist to see if we could delay her simulation scan until the fluid was drained. The doctor then pushed the patient back onto the table and said, "No, we are doing this." As I watched the poor elderly woman's eyes roll back in her head, we were all in shock, and I reported the incident. Sadly, this woman passed away before she even started treatment. I think this incident is one of the reasons I have become such a strong patient advocate, and I have no issues confronting anyone when patient safety and patient care are concerns. Thankfully, this doctor is no longer practicing. Story 18. My dad threw our cockatoo's already badly injured body with full force into the bottom of an empty trash can and took him in the bag, still crying out for help, to the dumpster. How he thinks I will ever speak to him again is a mystery to me still. Story 19. I was about 8 years old. My dad wanted me to pick blackberries so he could make a pie. We had a lot of blackberry bushes growing in the backyard. He told me to see him and gave me a kettle, but he took off my pants. He said I had to pick the berries that were deep in the bushes. As I tried to go deeper into the woods, the branches started puncturing my skin and I began crying. He heard me crying and told me that if I was going to cry, he would give me something to cry about. Some of my friends came by to play. My dad told them I was busy picking blackberries, but if they wanted, he would drive them to get soft ice cream cones. It hurts to even write this. Tears in my eyes. Why did he hate me so much? Story 20. When my mother finally got my father out of the house, he broke in a few days later and took all of the valuables, including emptying my money box. I was 3 years old, and there was maybe £5 in pennies in it. The police officers who came were appalled, and at that point, my mother's divorce lawyer started to hate my father. He also told my mother that he wouldn't be happy until he saw both of us in the gutter. Great guy, my father. Story 21. I treated a boy whose mother had kept him in a dog cage for his entire 3 years of life. He barely looked human, was no bigger than a newborn, and had a completely flat head due to severe neglect. Story 22. Watching people ignore a child being bullied on the street. Story 23. I once saw a pedestrian kick a homeless man who was asleep on the sidewalk. Utter trash of a human being. And yes, I said something. Story 24. We had baby ducks in our kindergarten class that we hatched. One of the ducklings passed away, so our teacher put it on a paper plate, which we all passed around the table to learn about death. One girl slammed her fist into the deceased duckling. I will never forget that person. Story 25. Most recently, the man who stole the hat from the boy at the United States Open. He was vile. Story 26. When I told my mother my stepfather molested me for years, she said, "You don't know what you've done to me," which is exactly why I told her as an adult and not as a child. It was absolutely devastating. She is still married to him even though she acknowledges that she knows it happened. Story 27. True story. I lost a baby, and my parents stepped in to take care of arrangements. I don't believe in funerals or any of that, but I was in no state to deal with it at all. My mother said when I was able, I needed to repay her $500 for the casket and service. I was young, broke, and struggling in more ways than financially. Nearly a year went by, and I was trying to crawl back and deal with reality. I called the funeral home and asked about pricing on a headstone. The least expensive was $800. I said it would still take me some time, as I had to pay back my mother the $500 for the service. The line went silent. I don't know how to tell you this, but because they already own plots, we didn't charge them anything for the baby's service or casket. My own mother did this to me, to us. I despise her heartless, vile soul. Story 28. I know a woman in her early 30s who fought cancer, went into remission, got pregnant, found out her cancer was back in terminal because of scans done for the pregnancy, gave birth, went through treatment to prolong her time, and just found out her husband has been having an affair this whole time. She stopped going to treatment and has just given up. She has 2 tiny children, a toddler and a 9-month-old. I want to do horrible things to that man. I don't know how anyone can do something like that. Story 29. My parents divorced and my father got custody. Since we lived on a farm, he was always there in case my disability caused a situation. It was probably smarter for my father to be there instead of my mother, who would have to handle her whole life once I hit puberty. People would openly ask him, right in front of me, "Why didn't you just give her up, Walt? I understand keeping the boys, but you should have put her in a home. It would be way easier now that you're single." They saw me as some troublesome child instead of my father's kid. I'm used to it, and my father handled my issues like a champ. But imagine someone saying that about your child. It's not even uncommon. I was born this way, and when they told my parents what to expect if I survived, my father needed a moment. When he was gone, my mother was told that abandoning a child was normal for fathers. They were genuinely surprised my father came back and didn't blame my mother. Story 30. The day after my father's funeral, my stepfamily of 23 years blocked me. I also placed items on his graveside. 24 hours later, they were found in the bin. Story 31. When I was a high school teacher, I had a student who was sexually assaulted the night before. I reported it to the authorities because I am a mandated reporter. The school office called the mother. The mother showed up, listened to her daughter's story, then left her daughter there and went home without her child. She did not want to be bothered by something like sexual assault against her daughter. Story 32. One of the other students in my registered nurse program had a 5-year-old who was diagnosed with brain cancer during our program, and they still held her to the strict absence standards of all the other students with no leeway at all. I felt so sorry for her and could not believe how heartless the administration was being. Story 33. A man was sitting at a Walmart minding his own business. Another man approached him and began harassing him with cruel words for no reason, prompting others to intervene and separate them. Story 34. Someone killing a group of puppies by bashing their heads against a tree. Story 35. I had my horses at a barn, and the barn manager got into a disagreement with the property owner and was kicked out. She moved all the horses overnight to a new barn. She had recently adopted a barn cat that was having trouble adjusting. It was scared and would not even come out to eat. When she moved, she left the cat to starve. I caught the cat and brought it home, intending to nurse her back to health and rehome her. She lived with me for 6 years and even moved states with me. I eventually rehomed her to a wonderful woman who sends me weekly updates to this day. Story 36. I had a gun pressed against my chest in broad daylight by a man robbing me and trying to steal my car in a parking lot. A few people walked by during the incident, and I looked them in the eye, silently mouthing, "Help, please." No one stopped, helped, or called the police. Story 37. My brother adopted cats at random as kittens, assuming they would be loving, sweet, and dedicated to him. None of them were. He adopted 5 cats over 10 years. What happened to them? The first one went to my grandmother, who kept her until I adopted her after my grandmother died. The second one went to a shelter because it wasn't friendly enough. The third and fourth were sisters who were not loving enough. They went to my mother. The fifth one went to my stepfather. The previous 2 had died by that point, because the little cat was a handful. The first cat I adopted from my grandmother lived 19 years and died 3 weeks ago. She hid under bed covers all day for weeks, but she was very sweet after being given a stable and caring environment. The same applies to all the other cats my brother adopted and abandoned. My brother is no longer part of our lives, but he made the worst pet decisions, and my entire family had to clean up his messes. Why adopt an animal if you don't intend to care for it until it dies? Why adopt it assuming it will love you forever? Why give it up if it doesn't meet your high expectations? Why assume cats will act like dogs? My brother needs to stay away, and I'm glad he has no contact with the family now. Story 38. My mom let our cat cry in pain in my closet all night because the emergency room veterinarian would be too expensive. This woman did not work and took multiple international vacations every year. We were not poor. When she finally took the cat to the veterinarian in the morning, they found she had a blood clot and was in extreme pain with nothing that could be done. This woman then had the nerve to act devastated by having to put the cat to sleep. Close second. My ex being completely unfazed after euthanizing his childhood dog. Closely followed by my ex crying when we were waiting to put his cat to sleep, but only when veterinary staff were in the room. Otherwise, he was on his phone or staring out the window as if bored rather than actually holding his cat. And lastly, when he told me I was not attractive anymore and then rolled over and went to sleep while I cried myself to sleep. Story 39. I saw my wife get bullied by our entire team for either being a woman or working too hard. Many people who barely talked to her crossed the line, and she had to remind them that we are together. We both did a no-call, no-show on a very busy day as revenge for HR not addressing her harassment. Last I heard, the company is having a hard time, which makes me happy. Story 40. An ex-family friend married a woman who had a toddler. He adopted the child and raised her as his own. They divorced when the daughter was 17. He remarried, and his new wife demanded that he cut his daughter out of his life since she was not actually his. He agreed to do this. Her mother then passed away, and he refused to let his daughter live with him. Story 41. I was cashiering at a water store when a woman across the street collapsed, and an ambulance was called for her. A customer came in and immediately started complaining about wasting resources on the homeless. Sir, what is your issue? Story 42. The April 2025 deportation of a 4-year-old United States citizen child with stage 4 kidney cancer, along with their mother and 2 other United States citizen siblings, to Honduras. Story 43. My ex bought goldfish to put in our dog's kiddie pool just for him to play with them. I cried about it because I felt so bad for the fish. He said they were just feeder fish anyway. He could not be persuaded. Story 44. A suicide bomber killed dozens of civilians to target a single United States Marine. Story 45. Getting laid off by my boss, who I was very close friends with. We went through divorces, near divorces, and abusive relationships together, and she acted cold as ice delivering the news, just reading a script. Story 46. My dad looked me dead in the eyes when I was about 10 and told me that if I ever married a black man, he would kill him and my children in front of me, leaving me alive to suffer for the rest of my life. He used to say all kinds of horrible things, but that has always been the one that stood out in my memory. Story 47. Being cheated on while my mother was passing away and after she passed. Story 48. Probably the time I saw a few thugs who cornered a cat and were shooting it with a BB gun. The area was some rundown place in England, Romford, and everyone seemed to have a BB gun in the early 2000s, including me and a friend I was with. They ran off when we showed up. Another incident was in 2012 when my stepfather knocked over an old man who was living with him. He owed him some money, so he knocked him over, and the man soiled himself as he hit the ground. My stepfather wiped his own waste on him and then kicked him out naked. Another time was when my terminally ill friend got arrested for driving without a license. She was meant to have an operation the next morning but missed it because the police said she did not need it. She had endometriosis and 2 forms of cancer and died 8 months later in front of me. I have had heartless people around me for over 20 years who make poor decisions, just like the police and courts did toward her. However, when it comes down to experiences I have witnessed, the first 2 stand out. Story 49. The person who set a woman on fire in the New York City subway and then used his jacket to fan the flames deserves condemnation. Equally blameworthy are the 2 police officers who walked past her as she burned alive. Story 50. My mother-in-law found a feral kitten and kept it for 6 months until it was no longer small and cute. Then she sold it on the internet to a family with a 6-year-old girl as a present for the girl's birthday. After a few days, my mother-in-law decided that she missed the kitten and demanded that they give it back to her. The little girl was heartbroken. Story 51. Images of American lynchings and the carnival-like behavior of the white people photographed with their children. Story 52. When my son died, I expressed a desire to have him included in the organ donation program. I felt he would have wanted to do it if he had been able to say so. He loved helping people. I was at home when the hospital staff called me for a family and staff meeting about his care plan. My ex, his mother, was there in person. The nurse included me on conference so I could participate. I appreciated his care team. The decision was finally made to perform the brain death exams, and I openly expressed that I wanted him to be an organ donor to save other lives and spare other parents the grief we were going through. After the meeting ended and the nurse hung up, I was told that my ex announced she wanted him buried whole and would not allow the organ donation. I was very upset. I asked her for her reasoning, expressing that it could not possibly be a moral, religious, or ethical reason. She replied that the way I was approaching her was not making her want to change her mind. In summary, my ex-wife refused to save lives with our deceased son's organs. Story 53. During the pandemic, my parents, like many others, were struggling in every way possible. Financially, they were barely making ends meet while supporting 2 children. My old dog was diagnosed with cancer, which spread rapidly. Treatment was not an option, and my parents could not afford to euthanize him. This dog was my dad's best friend. Ultimately, my dad had to put the dog down himself. I had never seen him break like that. Down and out for days, worse than when his own mother passed away. Later, my parents got a new puppy with all the typical puppy behaviors: jumping, barking, and abundant energy. My mother often disliked the dog and made her feelings very clear. I remember standing in the kitchen after the dog had gotten into the trash when my mother yelled at my dad, who was leaving for work, "Why don't you just put the dog down too?" I will never forget the change in my dad's expression and how he walked out the door. Story 54. My dad grew up in a dangerous neighborhood because my grandfather was too cheap to move them somewhere nicer. A bully almost killed my dad by throwing him off a hill into a rocky stream and leaving him for dead. After that incident, my extended family begged my grandfather to move out of that neighborhood for my dad's safety, but he refused. My dad jokingly refers to himself as a person whose parents were financially responsible for him for 18 years, and his sister as a princess who could do no wrong. The difference in how they were treated is really sad. I didn't know the extent of it for a long time. Story 55. My cat was passing away sooner than expected. We had a euthanasia planned, but he was suffering and seizing suddenly. The veterinarian I was gonna couldn't get him in. I was working nights at a homeless shelter and was absolutely broke. My friend loaned me money to take him to the very expensive euthanasia clinic. Once I arrived, I was informed that the price I had been quoted on the phone was for him to be euthanized alone. It was an extra $150 for me to be in the room. I couldn't afford the extra money. I had also taken off work to spend these last days with him. He was my cat soulmate. I had spent days just holding him, so I made peace with not being there in the last moment. I told the lady I couldn't come back with him. Then she yelled at me. I can't even remember exactly what she said, but she was insulting me for not going back with my cat. I was too emotionally overwhelmed to respond. She was the one who worked for a crooked veterinary hospital that charged extra for people to be with their loved ones. Story 56. A college classmate once broke down, sharing how her family did not support her studies. They wanted her to take the traditional route, marry and stay home. It was very sad. When she first started talking about it, she seemed fine, but within 20 seconds her lips began to quiver, and 30 seconds later she was crying. We reassured and supported her throughout the semester. I hope she proved her family wrong and continued with school. Story 57. I am a 52-year-old female. A few months ago, I experienced extreme blurriness in my eye and went to an eye specialist the next day. The doctor made a huge mistake and did not check my eye pressure. Because of his misdiagnosis and only spending 6 minutes with me, I am now permanently blind in my left eye. Mentally and physically, I am a mess. I am currently on a motorcycle vacation in North Carolina, but I had to sell my sport bike because I cannot ride or drive. My job fired me, I have no family, and my 3 friends all live in different states. My boyfriend, who is 48, is out riding his motorcycle with friends while I have been lying in a dark bedroom for 9 days. This is so traumatizing, losing half of my main sense. I fall a lot and have many issues. My boyfriend, whom I have been with for nearly 2 years, told me 2 months ago that after this trip I would move in with him. Last night, while we were lying in bed, I started crying. I have been crying a lot since this happened. Out of the blue, he said, "I don't want you moving in with me," giving reasons like how it is hard for me to cook because my balance and peripheral vision are gone. So he would not know my schedule or when I would be home every day to cook for him. I am so lost. I just need help to relearn everything. I feel like a burden now. I do not know where I am going to move. I have to be out of the place I rent in 5 days. I do not know what to do. I am sorry my anxiety is so severe right now. Story 58. Targeted plan to ruin my career over about a year and a half. Story 59. Working in an intensive care unit, we had a patient, we will call her Melody, who was young, about 20 years old, and she was dying of ovarian cancer. It was a very long, painful, and drawn-out process. Melody's mother was known to us as very difficult, despite Melody being sweet. When Melody was diagnosed with cancer as a young teenager, they were given the option of removing the ovaries entirely, the safest but most aggressive option, or radiation and chemotherapy. The mother said she wanted to be a grandmother someday and pushed for radiation and chemotherapy instead. The mother was almost always at the bedside, harassing the certified nursing assistants and micromanaging the registered nurses. It is important to note that Melody had a twin sister with whom the mother had a falling out and was estranged. One day, the mother had somewhere to be and finally left the bedside. We all breathed a sigh of relief. Then, Melody's twin came to visit her dying sister, something she could not do with the mother around. The twin left after a while, and all was quiet. When the mother returned, she found out that the sister had been there and lost her mind. I was in another room and heard her screaming at Melody for hiding the visit from her and going behind her back. She told Melody that the entire family was waiting for her to die and that she would end up just like an uncle by dying alone because she was done. She told her daughter she was leaving her to die alone and stormed out of the unit. No sooner had the woman turned the corner than I ran into the room to find Melody crying silently. More nurses came in and we all sat with her for a while, telling her she did not deserve that. I filed an incident report and told the charge nurse to alert security to not allow the woman back. But a week later she was back, acting like caregiver of the year. Melody died weeks later. Story 60. Working in end-of-life care. Many patients do not visit their dying family members. Story 61. When I was at college, my house was 100 kilometers away, so the bus picked me up and took me back home every day. One day, I was very sick and tired. I was vomiting constantly, had diarrhea, and my fever was 39 degrees Celsius. I really wanted to go home and rest, but the bus would come in 5 hours. I called my dad to pick me up. I was crying and shaking while I called him, but he just called me dramatic and ended the call. I went to the street and lay down under the sun to feel warm. Again, but I fainted. They took me to the hospital. When I woke up, I did not see any of my family, so I called my father again and told him I was sick in the hospital and asked him to come. He said no. When I felt better, I should come by bus. He refused to drive 100 kilometers just for me. I cried a lot. I spent 4 days in the hospital with no calls, no visits, and no one came. When I went back home, my dad yelled at me and almost hit me, saying I annoyed him and told me not to call him again. He is so heartless. I am sorry, my English is not very good. Story 62. My dad, who I no longer speak to, when I was about 5 years old. He had been out hunting and came home, entering my room to show me and my younger sister a small rabbit he had caught. He said, "Look at the cute bunny. Let us give the terrified animal a pat," then snapped its neck in front of us and walked out. He is not a good person, and I look forward to his passing, as does my sister. He has bladder cancer now, and I feel sorry for the cancer to have caught a case of my dad. Story 63. My step-parent is financially abusing my elderly parent. My parent lost everything. Their marriage, relationship with step-grandchildren. My parent knew all step-grandchildren from the day they were born, had to move from their home, and had to move away from their best friend. The stepchildren damaged my parents' reputation, and my parent lost a good credit rating for at least 10 years. You should have conversations with partners or spouses about emotional, physical, and financial fidelity so you know where you stand and they do too. If they avoid these conversations or give vague answers, it is a red flag. Story 64. I saw a man offer a homeless man some food when he walked out of McDonald's while I was sitting in the drive-through line. When the man reached for it, the first man snatched it away and said, "Get a job, you filthy bum." When I placed my order in the drive-through line, I bought a Big Mac, large fries, and a large soda for the homeless man and gave it to him when I came back with my order. Story 65. The American political environment. Story 66. My niece's mother lied about being abused by my half-brother and pursued full custody and child support. She borrowed all the money for lawyer fees from her friend's mother. When the court discovered she was neglecting her daughter and was verbally abusive, she lost custody and was ordered to pay child support. The court stated she could have visitation if she completed court-mandated therapy. She never attended therapy, never reached out to her daughter, never tried to see her, and never sent gifts or cards for birthdays or holidays. All she wanted was the child support. She has never wanted anything to do with her own daughter. My niece is about to turn 7 and has no memory of her mother and does not believe she even has a mother. Story 67. I used to work at a strip club where they did not care what the customers were doing. I got used to defending myself against men twice my size and becoming a multi-hitter just by location. Punch them in the face and the recoil slams their heads into something else because the staff could not do anything. The owner valued the customers more than the safety of the dancers. All of this came to a head for me on a Friday night. I got into an argument with the general manager over him not stopping sexual acts on the floor in front of everyone, particularly at my table and the man I was talking to. This girl, by definition, assaulted this man. I quit the next morning with the day shift manager, who I liked and worked well with. Monday night arrived. Nights were always crazier than days. A friend of mine was sitting with a regular customer who was very kind, and they were just chatting. The man walked in, sat down with them, I presume she sassed him because that was normal for her and she would have for something like that, and he stabbed her. He stabbed her in the abdomen and missed her liver by an inch. She blacked out in the club and ended up stopping an extremely profitable dancing career because of the trauma. The club she had worked at for years, where she was the top sales performer, immediately used her attempted murder as an advertising gimmick while she was recovering in the hospital. She had to threaten to sue them to make them stop, and they blacklisted her for the threat. Then they added to our contract a clause stating that we had to agree not to sue them or we could never work for them again. Story 68. A former close friend and coworker I had a crush on started seeing my ex. Even though she knew I still had feelings for him, she supported me when he dumped me, while I was admitted to a mental hospital, which she and another friend had called. She was seeing my ex. I made phone calls to her, and she picked me up shortly after I was discharged. She only told me because she had been caught and claimed she cared about me. I asked who else knew, and she said only 2 other people. Months later, I discovered our close friends all knew and lied to me about it to protect a beach trip. They all chose her when I left and supported the 2 of them, excluding me. The worst part is she would lie to her parents, saying she was at my house when she was actually at my ex's apartment. She also slept with his best friend. He dumped her for the same reason he dumped me after 4 months, Christian guilt. This was not the first time she had done something like this. Story 69. I did mission trips for a Lutheran church that my parents belonged to. I went on a trip to Vancouver, British Columbia, Lower East Side. We worked at a soup kitchen one evening. The trick was that you had to be there through the whole church service to get the free hot meal at the end. There were people banging on the door mid-service, hungry and desperate. But, being so Christ-like, they would not let anyone in after the service started. On our way back to our dorm, we saw someone who had apparently overdosed, lying under an awning on the sidewalk. I had never seen someone so limp in surroundings so indifferent. People stepped over his lifeless body. No one cared enough to check if he was okay. I sobbed. This moment still moves me to my core. Religion snuffed out empathy. I see it every day when I look at the current state of America and the world. It is abhorrent. Story 70. I watched a man in the Vatican posing an elderly beggar woman for a good picture. It was disturbing. He was treating her as an object rather than a person. Story 71. My landlord at the time was very elderly. He hired someone to help manage his properties. I received a call one day from the agent. My significant other had passed away a few months before, but I had not yet mentioned it to the landlord. I informed the agent about the passing. The agent promptly told me that I had to leave by the end of the year, in about 5 months, and that the monthly rent was being raised by about $800. I felt that was very heartless. Story 72. My father had recently been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and I was in the process of vacating my apartment several states away to move home with him to assist in his recovery or whatever the future held. I received an emergency call at about midnight, notifying me that he had taken a bad turn, and to come as soon as possible. I booked the first available flight and landed a few hours later during a brief layover. I noticed a missed call from my brother and returned the call. My sister-in-law answered. I greeted her, mentioned the missed call, and asked for my brother. The exchange was as follows. Her, you know your dad's dead, right? Me, well, I do now. Story 73. Follow immigration and customs enforcement around for a day, and you will witness all kinds of heartless things. Story 74. My partner passed away last year after 2.5 years of chemotherapy treatment. I used all my leave and purchased additional leave to take our 6 and 8-year-old children to Scotland this year to celebrate with his family. We are in Australia. They planned nothing for his anniversary. When I finally confronted his mother, she asked what I was expecting. I said anything. I still cannot believe that they did nothing. No lunch, no dinner, no gathering with the people who loved him. Apparently, they are not like us. I told her that was it, and she will never see our little ones again. Story 75. While I was at a tourist attraction, a little boy asked his mother if he could see a pumpkin. The mother then disciplined the boy for asking. Story 76. There was a dead fawn in the road. The person driving in front of me and I swerved to avoid it. but the driver in the lifted Jeep behind me ran right over it on purpose. Some people have serious issues. Story 77. My mom was dying, and I informed my sister well in advance, days before, that she needed to come see her. When my mom's condition worsened and we called my sister, she acted shocked. My mom was already heavily sedated and within hours of passing, when my sister said a half-hearted "Bye Mom" on the phone speaker by my mom's ear. She died without hearing her youngest daughter or only grandson's voices again. She lingered from 1 p.m. to 11 p.m. that day before passing away. I believe it was because she was waiting for my sister and nephew, who never came. Story 78. At 25, my husband passed away by suicide. I found him. After this happened, my own father, who I now consider just a sperm donor, told the whole family behind my back that I could bury my husband by myself. I had to find out from my aunt that this was even said. I am 27 now and have not had contact with him for 2 years. The family showed up for the funeral, but he did not. Story 79. My sister had active coronavirus disease 2019 in 2021, and she was going to work without wearing a mask. I told her she was risking other people's lives, and she said, "Like who? People know they are at risk when they leave the house." I responded that I needed to occasionally leave the house to buy groceries or pick up prescriptions, but my 1-year-old infant who was fighting stage for cancer would die if I got coronavirus disease 2019. She said she didn't care. She didn't care if my baby died. Story 80. Cruelty to animals. People abusing stray animals or pets for amusement. Story 81. Watched a girl get berated and verbally harassed by one of those preachers who go to public spaces for their preaching, which is always based on tearing others down. I did not realize what was happening but saw a group of 6 to 8 guys just watching from about 20 feet away. When I approached them and they told me the situation, I asked why no one was helping. Watching the bystander effect happen directly in front of me was infuriating, but all I could do was approach the girl and gently coax her away from the preacher while another girl started to argue with him. I managed to lead her far enough away, and a man who happened to pass by and saw what had just happened was kind enough to get me paper towels from the bathroom. I stayed with her, helped her calm down, and made sure she was okay before she left. I will always remember the absolute fury I felt at seeing the group of men who did nothing. Instead, it was 2 women who helped. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.